This is a video that will ask you to take nothing for granted. It will ask questions to which you may assume you have ready answers. Our first question is, do you assume man has landed on the moon? If your answer is no, then this video will surprise you. If you do not take for granted that men have in actuality flown to and landed upon the moon and then flown back to Earth safely, then you are a true skeptic, and you will appreciate this video's powers of rational questioning, its scientific show-me, prove-it style. It's both unexpected and refreshing. On the other hand, if you answer yes to the question, have men actually flown to and landed upon the moon and so forth, then this video may irritate and annoy you. The handheld camera shots are not Hollywood lighted and not pre-staged. They are raw, ill-lighted, and shot under the glare of federal officials and their guards whose eyes, in some cases, blaze with hatred and contempt and the urge to arrest and officially punish. So we apologize in advance for a lack of slickness. In fact, roughness is the form true investigations and evidence usually takes. Evidence is neither huge nor glaring, and it can be small and hidden and difficult to see. And often, as you will see in this video, evidence of government lies are kept from the public's eyes behind wires, stone walls, and gates of secrecy. So instead of looking for the slickness that professional image makers have taught us to believe is truth, look instead and listen to a video that does not attempt to form your thoughts and control your thinking. This is a video that provokes your thought. It asks the unaskable questions and does not take governmental answers as gospel. So if your answer is no, I am in doubt about a man on the moon, then here is some of the evidence that you may wonder about. And for you who say, yes, I saw the moonwalk on TV, we simply ask that you suspend your annoyance with our improper questions while you see this video to its conclusion.
Hello, my name is Jim Collier. I'm an investigative reporter, and this is an open letter to Frank Hughes. Frank Hughes is the man in charge of astronaut training at Johnson Space Center in Houston. He trains the astronauts now, and Frank, you trained them back in 1969 through 72 in the Apollo mission, so you were the expert that I got when I called NASA and spoke to Audrey Schwartz in the press department and said, I need an expert to answer some questions, and you've been very kind in answering. But here is the entire problem, or as much as I can get into this 2-hour tape. What happened was, a man named Ralph Renee came to me several years ago with a manuscript for a book called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. And he was a physicist who had studied, a self-styled physicist, I guess the press will call him after this, but he knows his physics really well. And I was incredulous, like most people, that we didn't go to the moon. And I started investigating him. And then I found out that he got his information, or a lot of it, from a man named Bill Kaysing, who worked for Rocketdyne as a man who wrote scientific papers for the scientists, and he had a gray pass, which meant he could go anywhere and see anything. And he saw a lot of propulsion experiments, etc. And he wrote a book called We Never Went to the Moon. Astronaut James Lovell of Apollo 13 called Kaysing a wacko for claiming we never went to the moon. Kaysing, who's been investigating NASA for 20 years, is suing Lovell for libel. The trial takes place October 7th in Santa Cruz, California. Kaysing analyzed NASA photos and came to the conclusion they were all taken on Earth. The results have been printed in media around the world. Notice the upper right-hand corner of this photo. It was supposed to have been taken on the moon, yet the ceiling beams are clearly evident. Here's a close-up of those beams. In January 1997, London-based Fortean Times printed an analysis of NASA's film footage by award-winning British cinematographer David Percy. Percy came to the same conclusion as Bill Kaysing. All the photos were faked. Both based their conclusions on shadows running in the wrong direction or running in two directions at once, indicating spotlights were used. The sun also appears to be originating from a spotlight, as there is a halo around it. There can be no halo where there is no atmosphere. Percy is doing a BBC documentary on all this, and it will appear in London and around the world sometime this year. He's an award-winning cinematographer who is writing a book called Whistleblowers, and it should be out in 1997. This famous shot is in almost every NASA book. You can see in the faceplate that the astronaut taking the photo of this astronaut has no camera, and the camera is shooting down on the head of the astronaut, making the camera at least 8 feet high. That's impossible. They were both on level ground in front of the spaceship. This famous shot is filled with anomalies, including tracks on the moon's surface. You can see the antenna on top of the crosshair, and the crosshair is etched into the camera. It couldn't be there. And just above this crosshair, the picture is airbrushed out. This famous rock has a Roman numeral C on it. Could not happen. And it also appears to be sculpted or paper mache'd. How can you have a round rock where there's no atmosphere, wind, rain to round that rock? So I went to investigate the LEM, that strange contraption that supposedly landed them on the moon. It never flew on Earth. Frank, it never flew on Earth. So I said, well, who invented this thing? I went to Grumman Aircraft. And they're in Bethpage, Long Island, and I said, give me all the material that showed how this was developed. What thought went into it? And so when it crashed on Earth and never flew once, I said to myself, why would the astronauts' wives let them go to the moon and test it out there? I mean, you'd have to be wacko to do that. And a funny thing happened, Frank. They told me all the paperwork had been destroyed, that all they had was some PR pieces, a couple of photos, not even photos, they had drawings. I found that incredible. You spent $30 billion to go to the moon, and all the paperwork's been flushed down the toilet. So I went to the archives in Washington, and I went to the archives at NASA, and I went to you. There's no paperwork. The man who invented the LEM should have won the Nobel Prize. His paperwork on what made him think this would work should be in every museum that NASA has, but it's nowhere. And so the taxpayers spent $30 billion, Frank, on what half the world thinks is a hoax. This is the lunar module falling freely toward the moon.
But we got it done right here 5-9, Jim, and we're sailing free. One, stand by one, Jim. Okay. You look just as pretty in Earth light as you do in sunlight. Roger, America. Have a good burn. You're loud and clear.
Frank, let's start with this book by Jeffrey Kluger. It was on the Apollo 13 adventure, and Kluger worked with astronaut James Lovell and with NASA, and so I assume everything in here is as accurate as that investigative reporter could be. All right, Frank, this is the LEM, and this should have looked like a rocket. You can see how it's back here. It's lopsided. And these jets, this one, they're on the top. The theory being that when these jets fired, this is the rocket that held this thing up. When these fired, it should have tipped it over immediately. I want to know the scientific principle, the aerodynamic principle that would have kept this contraption from tipping as soon as these top rockets fired, because we see it later. You'll see going along the moon's surface, and it's going horizontal to the ground. In other words, these were making it move. But if it's floating on this, 10,000 pounds of thrust right here, and these shoot off, what scientific principle would keep this thing from tipping down and turning and spinning and crashing to the ground? This simulator, the LEM, flew once on Earth, and it blew up, almost killing Neil Armstrong, who bailed out. The LEM never flew on Earth. Now, Frank, one of the most important parts of this investigation was whether they could get in and out of the LEM. And it says in this book by Jeffrey Kluger is that an overlooked fact of the lunar module design was that the door opened inward toward them instead of out, which made it almost impossible for them to get out. It says here that the size inside the LEM where the two astronauts were was barely the size of 2 phone booths. And I measured that. It was 24 inches by 36 inches, and I don't believe they could have gotten out, but we'll see. We're at Space Center, Houston. I have a meeting here with Frank Hughes. Frank Hughes is the chief in charge of astronaut training. He was the only man, he claims, who's left from the Apollo missions, and anything Frank Hughes says should probably be considered gospel. This is a simulator of the crew.
Remember, this is not a wall here. This
I know, but he couldn't get his backpack past the bars that are here. So even though it went back, you couldn't back up because there were metal bars across here. So he could not back straight in.
I don't know about bars.
Well, you see him up there.
There's enough room that you could turn around. You know, you could put it on, you could get yourself situated, your buddy helps you get it on and get it running.
Now, did they...
You had to fold these things up. Remember, this is what I was talking about, the folding up of the controllers.
Right.
Okay.
But the panel sticks out here about 8 inches.
Yeah.
So it takes up... can I measure that?
Sure.
It takes up about... if that's 36 inches from the front to the back... It takes up about 8 of those inches.
But you have plenty more inches here.
Yeah, but you can't back up into that, Frank. That's my problem. I mean, they may be there, but...
You can back up into it. That's what I'm saying.
All right, you have about 24 inches from here to the front of this panel. Now, when they come from the command module into the LEM, they have to come through this tunnel and drop this hatch. And this space from here across is also only about 32 inches at best. It's slightly less wide than the front door. All right. Here's where this is half the section. One man stands here. His feet are rooted to these. This holds him from floating down here, these sections. You'll see it in the video. This is half the door, about 18 inches. And from the front to the back is about 32 inches, because when the doors open, the door hits the bulkhead in the back. This right here keeps them from backing up into this bell area with their backpacks on, and they stow their equipment up here. So it's hard to back up. And here, this curve is equal with the floor right here. So they can't get into this section at all. And you'll see that there's wires and wires and tubes here keeping them from They have to watch where their feet go. So it's so tight in there that two men in full suit with backpack cannot move. I misspoke. The door is actually 16 inches wide here. Half the door, it goes 32 inches to the bulkhead in the back. And you can see on the sides that it's filled with instrumentation. And you can see the bell here goes up 18 inches. And they were laboring under the suitcase-sized backpacks that they would have to wear on the moon. And that they had to crawl out on their hands and knees. And that they had to waddle. They were so puffed up, ballooned up is the words. They're in their backpacks, ballooned up in their suits. Here it is here, balloon-like suits, laboring under their backpacks, that they had to waddle in there, Frank. In other words, they couldn't bend their legs. They couldn't bend over in the middle. Under 4.5 pounds of pressure per square inch in their suits. And so there's a real question as to whether they could get out of that limb or not. And according to this book, it was an idea overlooked by Grumman. Seems to me that should have been the first thing you did, Frank, that NASA did when they went to Grumman to build this, was say, hey, these astronauts need a certain amount of room to get out of there. But that didn't happen. This book, U.S. Space Gear, is in all NASA museums. One can pick it up and study the history of the space suit used in the Apollo missions. The problem with the suit from the very beginning was that they were basically inflated rubber balls. The astronauts could not bend their arms or legs and fingers in there. This is an early attempt at a pressurized suit, and here you can see a man in a pressure chamber testing out the suit, and you can see those ballooned up arms. That was the problem that NASA had to solve before they could go to the moon. And here was an attempt at using convoluted plastic suits to try to contain that ballooning rubber problem. I don't think NASA has really solved that problem totally yet, because I was at ILC that makes these suits, and they're still working on metal arms for these suits to try to bend the elbows. Here you can see the men in a NASA drawing. You can see the thickness and bulkiness of these suits. Very difficult to bend when pressurized at 4 pounds of pressure per square inch. You can see the mass here in them. And to try to get out of a space capsule, the LEM, with these suits on, here is a Washington Post photo of those suits taken on the Earth. And there's no camera here. A camera goes out front of this area here, adding another foot. So from front to back, it would be close to 3 feet. And they only had 2 feet inside the LEM from front to back, from instrument panel to the back where they couldn't back up because of the bell, and there was a bar going across. And you see the other man wearing the camera there. Very difficult to maneuver these suits, and it would have been very difficult to get out of the LEM with these suits on, with the door opening inward. And one astronaut had to stand in back of that door. He couldn't get out of the way. So I had to find out what the inside of the LEM looked like and what was in back of that door and whether they could back up into that section. So I went to the Space Museum in Washington, where Alan Nadell, the curator, promised an hour of his time and a cherry picker to get up here and look at the inside of the LEM. We're looking through a glass window through the door. That's a 32-inch door. And you can see the wires and tubes back there that the astronauts would back into if they backed up in that little 24-inch section. Up top there you can see the bar that keeps them from backing into the bell section behind the 24-inch section in back of the door. So they were trapped in 24 inches, and that's the bell that's above the 18-inch bulkhead in the back and just below the upper hatch that goes between the LEM and the command module. They come down from the top. It's a very small, cramped space. You can see the door to your left. That's above the bell. That's the bell. There's about 3 feet between there and the ceiling, where the hatch is, that they come between the command module and the LEM. There's the door. It's about 2 inches wide, taking up more space. And you can see that instrumentation in back of that door. They couldn't back into there with their backpacks on without chancing breaking those instruments or flipping toggle switches. It was very delicate. They could spend the rest of their life on the moon if they made a mistake back there in those bulky suits. That's what I was trying to get. But now you can see the instrumentation again. I'm trying to get a cherry picker here to go up because the curator, Alan Adele, was giving me a hard time. I drove 5 hours to get to Washington to measure the inside of the LEM. You can see the floor there from front to back is 32 inches, 24 of it usable because the upper panel is in the way above the door, and you can see the delicate tubes and wires there that they couldn't back into without possibly breaking. They had to be very careful. You don't have two chances, and one astronaut had to back in back of that door once it opened to the inside, and it's only 36 inches from side to side and 24 inches to the back. And so the astronaut had to get out of the way. Two men in there, shoulder to shoulder, were cramped like two men in a phone booth. Now here's Alan Adele, the curator, who refused me the cherry picker in the beginning after promising me I could have it. But I finally got him to give it to me. And it's coming now so I could get in closer to measure it. And Adele was not happy with me at all. Now we're trying to get in closer. This is through the side window of the LEM. I'm trying to show you the panels on the side where they couldn't put their backpacks in. That yellow bar is in the center. And this here, you can see the space between the ceiling and the bell there is about 3 feet. There's the top of the bell. That's above the engine, the bell. And they come down through the hatch between the LEM and the command module. Those holes in the floor are where their feet are attached to keep them from floating, and you can see the astronaut stations are directly in front of the door. And they couldn't back up into this bell section either, so they were trapped in the middle. Anchored to the floor here, and that these would have to be stuck to the bulkhead door. So, Frank, I asked you if there was an official manual telling them how to exit the LEM, and you said no. You said each crew had to figure it out for themselves. But there was no actual manual telling them how to do this, right?
Oh, yeah, we have procedures.
But in a manual somewhere I could get a copy of?
Sure.
Do you have a copy of it?
I don't personally. We can look for one. I mean, we had checklists for everything.
But you don't remember what it was? There was no standard? Yeah.
Each crew pretty much had their own deal.
Frank, each move of the crew was choreographed to the second, and yet nobody told them how to get out? That's an incredible statement to make. So I went to Boeing. They built the rover, that little car that they ran on the moon. And Boeing said they had no documents either. They'd all been destroyed. All been destroyed. You're looking at the rover, and you can see all the equipment on the front. It could not double over in half. All right, Frank, now you told me that the rover was not folded over when it fit into the LEM. We'll get to that later, but I want to show you this here now. You can see here in the NASA drawings that the wheels are folded up and it is folded over in the middle. In fact, it looked something like that, folded over, and the wheels fold up. And this is 3 feet from here to here, so this is about 2 feet long. You can see here that this is how it would have had to have fit into the section of the LEM where it fit. This is the design, and this is 4 feet. This makes this about, at least over 2 feet. This, Frank, is how it was folded up in the side of the LEM, and that's how it looked folded up, only you dispute this. You say that it was not folded like this. You said it was folded on a 90-degree angle, and that's going to be very important coming up. Let's talk about it. All right, now, this is NASA's concept where the front and the back of the rover were folded over onto the chassis. What you say happened, Frank, was that the front was folded on a 90-degree angle like this, and the tires stuck out the front and the back. It would have looked like this, with the tires sticking this way, and you would have had to fit it into the side of the LEM. This would have been 8 feet long. The LEM section was only 5 feet long, and when I spoke to Grumman, they said they never enlarged that size at all. They would have had to have increased the size of the Saturn rocket by 3 feet to fit this in. And this is how it looks in the rocket ship. The LEM is in this section. These sections pull apart, and this nose here, this probe, attaches to the LEM here. It does a somersault in space. So I went to Houston to photograph it because I doubted it could fold in half and fit into the 5-foot section, and you agreed with me, Frank. You said it folded on a 90-degree angle.
All of these pieces, first of all these things that stick up in the air, like the antennas and everything, have to be put on after it's unfolded.
Right, I'm talking about the metal, the white
Metal
boxes.
Metal. Okay. The seats fold down forward, so they're flat.
Right.
Okay. And you can see the hinges.
No, I want to talk about the stuff in the front.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the whole thing.
Okay.
This stuff in the back,
Right.
is a tool module that's set on there, so that comes off.
They put
So
that
that
on
area's
the
flat.
moon?
Yeah, that comes from that other equipment bay. Remember I pointed it out
Okay.
on the LEM?
Okay.
All that stuff is in there, all your tools and everything. So that's off. That's flat.
Okay.
All right. The seats are where your batteries are.
Right.
You're sitting on the batteries, effectively.
Okay.
All right. So the seats fold down, flat. Okay.
Right.
And now, right behind or in front of each of these wheels, there's a hinge point. that goes
Right.
Across. Okay. So then this piece folds up this way, 90 degrees.
Right.
That takes the whole back end up off the ground.
Right.
And then the back part, just in front of the wheels, folds the other way. So it folds over. So
Does this back piece fold flat over the seats?
No.
Okay.
No,
Does
it
the
just
front
folds
piece?
90 degrees.
Does the front? Okay, and the front does too. Now another thing. The astronauts had this camera made for them specially to photograph stars. Now, had stars been photographed on the moon, the astronomy buffs here could have said, absolutely, we went to the moon because they know how to orient that kind of thing. And all the astronauts have ever said is they never saw stars. Even when they took pictures of the Earth, there were no stars in the picture, and yet the Earth is reflected light, and the stars should have been bright like headlights of cars because there's no atmosphere. Sky totally black, but there's no stars. And even in some pictures, the Earth is about the size of the moon, which it should have been at least 4 times bigger. And so the people who are your critics, Frank, say that was a phony shot. Somebody should have thought of that. Anyway, I asked you on the phone, I said, where are the photos? Hundreds of them should have been taken, should have been in manuals, books, everywhere. They should have been proud of them. You said maybe in some scientific journals. You couldn't tell me the journals. That would have proven you went to the moon, Frank. But there's no stars in any NASA photos, so we can't prove it that way.
Young set up an ultraviolet camera to provide the first astronomical observations from the moon.
So I said, well, what do you got that proves we went there? I got no paperwork from Grumman or Boeing. There's nothing in the archives. There's stars don't exist, and we'll get into some other things. And you said that the rooster tail of the rover, when it was running along the moon's surface, proved it.
With Duke acting as photographer and Young as driver, they put the rover through a full test.
Man, you are really bouncing. Is he on the ground at all? That's 10 kilometers. Huh? He's got about 2 wheels on the ground. Okay, turn sharp. I have no desire to turn sharp. Okay, here's a Sharpie. Hey, that's great. He's a big rooster tail out of all 4 wheels. And as he turns, he skids. The back end breaks loose just like on snow. Come on back, John. Hey, the deck is running. Then I'll tell you, Indy's never seen a driver like this. Okay, when he hits the craters and starts bouncing, it's when he gets his rooster tail. He makes sharp turns.
So I checked that out, and we'll see that further in the film. And I found that that was the absolute proof, Frank, that was taken on Earth. And the theory is, when we get there, so you'll understand, is that Einstein's theory, and remember, the moon has gravity. Moon has gravity. Like Earth, it's 1/6 the Earth's, but it's gravity. And you can see in the NASA videotape that I'm about to show that everything looks pretty heavy. I mean, once they got that LEM into gravity, it would have operated just like Earth gravity and been subject to the same effects. So when the rover spits dust out of the back, the law is that, the physics law is, that as fast as that dust or dirt, whatever it is you were spitting out of the back wheels of that rover, should have fallen to Earth at the same speed that it went up, because there's no atmosphere to stop it. And yet what we're going to see, Frank, is that it goes up and then it hits a wall of atmosphere. And it stops and it trails off. You can see it. It should have made a perfect arc going down as fast as it went up. But it doesn't, and you can see trails of it as it goes up, hits the atmosphere, and stops. Goes up, hits the atmosphere, and stops. That was done on Earth.
With Duke acting as photographer and Young as driver, they put the rover through a full test.
Man, you are really bouncing. Is he on the ground at all? That's 10 kilometers. Huh? He's got about 2 wheels on the ground. Okay, turn sharp. I have no desire to turn sharp. Okay, here's a Sharpie. Hey, that's great. He's a big rooster tail out of all 4 wheels.
All right, Frank, let's study this carefully. It's very important because what we have here is no atmosphere and 1/6 gravity. This rooster tail should probably have gone up 60 feet in the air, and yet it only goes up maybe less than 10 feet, and it creates waves. You'll see them go up, waves. It doesn't make an arc like it should. The theory being, see that wave? That's because it hits atmosphere and stops. The sand, the dust. Those particles should have kept going because nothing should have stopped it, but it hits resistance. And you can see it go, and they don't go up very high for no gravity. So let's take a look at this again. I mean, this is a very important point. This whole rover problem, the side of the LEM was only 5 feet high. And yet, when this car was folded on a 90-degree angle, it would have been anywhere from 8 to 11 feet long, Frank. It could not have fit in there. And later we're going to see when they take the LEM in Apollo 15 the rover out of the LEM in Apollo 15, you don't actually see them doing it. You obscure the photography so you can't see them take it out of the side. Now watch here. We're going to have those waves. A body in motion tends to remain in motion unless stopped. And the only thing that could stop this soil would be atmosphere. And that right there, those waves are where it hits the atmosphere and stops, Frank. I want to know what NASA scientific principle says that that's wrong. How on the moon could it create a wave like that? The dirt should have gone all the way through in a perfect rainbow arc. Watch again. It's very important. See those waves coming back in? Waves, lines like on a graph, telltale signs that it's hitting a wall of thick atmosphere and the dust is being suspended in it. They should not be there. You have to explain to me how they could possibly be there in no atmosphere to say that you were on the moon. And this was your definite proof, you said. You hung up on me at this point. You were exasperated and said you wouldn't talk to me anymore because I didn't believe that this was real. Let's take one more look at it. Like on a graph, there's a wave. The dust particles go up and get stopped. This was your proof. And this is my proof that it was taken on Earth.
So there's my problem. I'm willing to say we went to the moon, Frank, if we can get past all the technical problems we're about to see. If I can see some paperwork, if I can see anything that proves it. And the video we're about to see, the official NASA video, appears to be all a fraud.
Warning him, and as I recall, Main B was the one that had a M spike on it once before. In the interim here, we're starting to go ahead and button up the tunnel again.
April 11th, 1970, launch day. The crew of Apollo 13. Jim Lovell, commander and veteran of 3 previous missions. He had orbited the moon Christmas 1968 on Apollo 8. Fred Hayes, his first time up, lunar module pilot. Jack Swigert, command module pilot. 3 days ago, he was on the backup crew. Now he replaced Ken Mattingly. Mattingly had been dropped from the mission because he had been exposed to German measles.
Notice the blue sky outside the window. It should be pitch black in outer space.
One of the big problems was consumables. There would be enough to eat and drink. But in space, there are other factors. Oxygen to breathe, electrical power to keep the spacecraft alive, water to cool the equipment and keep it operating. To conserve the electric power and cooling water, the crew...
Now look at the white light coming in through this window. You can't have white light without atmosphere. It should be pitch black. And see the blue light coming down in the lower right-hand corner coming in from that window? And blue light coming in from this window?
The consumables, cooling water, electric power.
The LEM water gun was leaking, and we shut that off. I guess it leaked about a quart of water, I would estimate. But it took me about 2 days to get my feet dry.
So I noticed this tunnel coming down from the top of the ceiling of the LEM. What could it be?
The next point, Frank, that we'll see in the picture is you said that this hatch right here opened toward the back this way. And you can see right here, Frank, that it opens toward the left-hand side. I don't know why you told me it opened toward the back, except that in the Apollo 13 shot, we're going to see that it opens toward the back, and I claim that the Apollo 13 video here was all a fraud.
Now you can see the tunnel coming down from the ceiling about a foot. You can see the hatch door, the white silver thing in the back. One of the most important pieces of evidence that we found was this drogue and probe here. This is the front of the command module right here. This here part is called the probe. It attaches to the LEM and pulls the two together in space. This is the opening to the LEM tunnel, and I measured it. It's only 27 inches across, although NASA says it's 32 inches across. And there's metal connector boxes in there. In the end, it was only 24 inches of clearance. This is an artist's concept of what it looked like inside. The astronaut is in the command module, and the probe and the drogue is in the LEM, and they have to go between the two. He has to take that equipment out of there. And so when I measured it, it was 27 inches across, and with the boxes inside, the drogue connector boxes, which you'll see, it only had 24 inches of clearance, and 24 inches, in a man in a blown-up spacesuit trying to get through that tunnel, he would have torn his suit. It would have been a very tight squeeze, but you'll see in their simulator it wasn't. What you see here is the drogue. This is the part that fits into the tunnel of the LEM before they open the tunnel. This is the probe attachment that fits into it from the command module, pulls the two together. This is the command module, which we just showed you, and you can see here the latches attached to this metal ring around the outside. Very important. So in Washington, I videotaped it, and you can see a box inside there that connects the probe, and it looked like it was only about 27 inches wide. So I tried to get over there and measure it, but Alan Nadell would not allow me. When I got this close, he forced the cherry picker away and said, "You cannot measure that hatch." Alan, I wanted to get that hatch, and it's really important that I get the size of the width of that hatch, and we do have a few minutes to get it. Is there any reason why I can't?
Pitching a roll program, and this baby is really going.
The next day, Pete Conrad and Alan Bean entered the lunar module, leaving Dick Gordon in the command module.
This tunnel is much too wide. The real tunnel is only 24 inches. I measured it. And the top hatch, you can see it comes down. I reached inside in Houston here, Frank, and I got the camera in. You can see that it is attached to the left and that it's only about an inch down from the ceiling. That inch is very important. You couldn't waste 10 inches of space, and yet in the simulator in Apollo 13, you will see that the tunnel comes down about a foot. It's not the same tunnel, and that this attaches to the left-hand side, not to the rear. Therefore, the Apollo 13 shots had to be taken in the simulator and not in the real LEM. And you can see that this hatch opens to the left. There are too many rivets and no connecting latches in this tunnel.
If you want my opinion of how they handled the situation when it happened, they handled it exactly like we'd expect them to. They were about as well on top of it as anybody could be. We knew what we knew, which isn't very much, I'll have to. We actually had a third little sleep restraint, which Fred then...
Blue light in outer space.
It's a little bit warm.
The astronauts faced another problem, their own exhaled breath. The lithium hydroxide chemical to take carbon dioxide out of the air was not sufficient in the lunar module. They would have to...
The hatch door is open to the rear.
The canisters from the command module to fit the hoses in the LEM. On the ground, an adapter was fashioned from materials the crew had available in the LEM. Cardboard from a checklist, plastic bags, and tape. After checkout in an environmental chamber, the directions for construction were sent up to Aquarius.
At this point in time, I think the partial pressure of carbon dioxide was reading about 15 millimeters. And we constructed two of these things and put them online, and I think within an hour, the partial pressure...
I believe this is astronaut Lovell here with his hand on that funnel-shaped instrument coming down from the ceiling, and he dives down 7 feet. There should have been a bell there to stop him at about 3 feet.
So you see that survival now became one of initiative and ingenuity, and had, whether we could make it back or not. But in a situation like that, there's only one thing you can do. You just keep going, and you just keep thinking up where you can get more consumables. And so that's exactly what we did.
On April 17th, they prepared for re-entry.
Let's talk about hypergolic fuel, which was used in the LEM. Unsymmetrical dimethylhydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide came out of these side thrusters. These propelled the LEM horizontally along the surface of the moon, and yet we never see the dark red opaque smoke coming out of these rocket thrusters or the one on the bottom. We should have seen that because the smoke burns dirty. So I asked you about that, Frank, and you said... If it had hypergolic fuel, and so it with hypergolic fuel is opaque when it burns. Opaque. It has smoke.
There's no smoke.
No smoke in hypergolic fuel.
I mean, the combustion is very thorough. Okay, I mean, the two chemicals combine so well.
Frank, the chemicals don't combine well. They burn terribly dirty and opaque.
If you look at it, there's a real problem with seeing it, but you don't see any, except at the initial start of a blast, when it fires, before the mixing gets complete. And that's what you see in here, actually.
No, I'm talking about underneath there, too.
Well, it was the same ones. Same fuel was used for these as for the others.
Uh-huh. So you're saying that hypergolic fuel does not create a black smoke at all? Clear.
Smoke? The fuels we use. Now, hypergolic, let's talk about it. Hypergolic is a chemical term that just says you don't need an igniter. The two chemicals.
Right, and so the ones you used didn't create black smoke? We can go down.
Okay.
You were taking advantage of me there, Frank. You knew I meant red, opaque smoke. But you did say that when these rockets blasted off, the beginning smoke should have been opaque, dark, because it didn't have complete burning. And yet we do not see that in these three blast-offs, Apollo 15, 16, and 17. No black smoke at all, and it should have been there. Heavy, thick, particulate matter. Even in no atmosphere, it would have been there, Frank.
Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, Edwin Buzz Aldrin.
It's 250 degrees in the sun on the moon. How could this footstep have clumped the soil and stuck together without moisture?
Reading you loud and clear, Houston. How are you?
The next day, July 20th, marked the beginning of a new era. Mike Collins, alone in the command module called Columbia, watched as Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin undocked the lunar module called Eagle. As the Eagle rotated slowly, Collins inspected it carefully. For now it was time for the descent to the surface of the moon and into history. "50,000 feet above the moon, Eagle's descent engine ignited and began the deceleration for landing. As they descended, Armstrong and Aldrin watched the craters and mountains of the moon pass beneath them.
Go for landing, over. Roger, understand. Go for landing.
At this point, the Eagle rolled onto its back to give the landing radar surface acquisition. Now the crew was flying blind until the slow pitch maneuver brought the lunar horizon to their view.
100 feet, 3.5 down, 9 forward.